everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of NLL Lacrosse Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, Channel 250. And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me is our co-host Gary Groob and our very special guest Neal Powless, the first Aboriginal coach of a European team, in this case, the Dutch team. And I got to tell you, sir, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And I'd like to ask you, here it is. I hope you're ready. This is a real tough question.
All right.
How did you start in lacrosse?
I was born.
That's the best answer we've heard so far, Gary.
I was born with the last name Powless.
There you go.
Yeah, so that sealed my fate for the first few years.
Yeah, as they say in French, fait accompli.
Yeah. So I'm actually Powless from Onondaga and Syracuse. So there's two Powless lacrosse playing families, and we often get the question, "Are you related?" And we're actually not. But you have the Gaylord Powless family line, Six Nations, that whole group, Delby and Chris and all those other guys, right? And amazing players in that family. And then in my family from Onondaga, my grandfather, Irving Sr., played professional in the 30s in Geneva and Rochester. And then his son, Irving, played with Oren, and then played against Jim Brown, knocked him down a few times. And then my brother, Barry, also played for the Bandits and then coached for the Nighthawks, and then myself, and then cousins and all kinds of other things like that, right? So from our family line on the Onondaga, Syracuse side. So two different Powless families, but both with a great lacrosse heritage, lacrosse connection to history and culture and who we are and part of our identity as playing. So
you rolled right over Jim Brown, and that's a pun intended, but you implied that's what you did.
Well, my dad did that, and it's funny when he knocked him over. He was supposed to be playing with Onondaga against the Mohawks, and then the Mohawks had a car breakdown, and they only showed up with 5 guys, so they split up the Onondaga team. It kind of had like an inter-squad scrimmage because they had this huge crowd there, and so my father ended up on the opposite team from Jim Brown. And my dad did say that Jim was probably the best athlete he ever saw pick up box lacrosse and become a box lacrosse player within one game. So you could tell he really good athlete. But he got the ball, ran down, and did what he normally did and run over people. And my dad stepped in the way, knocked him over. And apparently he asked Oren after the game. He said, "Who was the mosquito who knocked me over?" But then the hip check was legal. So that was how he did it.
But still, we should have led with the fact that he was an NFL running back. I mean,
Jim Brown, yeah.
Led with that story, right? A lot of people don't know there's a lot of Jim Browns in the world. So this one in particular was an NFL running back and very famous. In fact, did you kind of glean a little bit off him when it came to movies and stuff? Is that where you got the idea about movies?
No, I fell into that. So I've always been someone who likes to be creative and also not afraid to do something new or different. My dad kind of taught me a number of things, and one of them always being open. So be coachable, right? So every team I got on, I could learn something from that coach, even if it was, I don't like what that coach did or said, right? And so there's always something you can learn from the next space. And I happened to be coaching a team, and the production crew came into town for Crooked Arrows to recruit lacrosse players and happened to show up at one of my practices. So I took it upon myself to share a couple ideas about what I thought the would look good in a movie. They invited me in the next day to run a drill, and they had someone that was there running a drill or running the day, right? I showed up. I said, well, before I run a drill, what do you want to see? And the sports coordinator, Mark Ellis, who has 60 plus movies on his IMDb, including Any Given Sunday, Miracle, The Program, Batman, anything football. or baseball. He's done it, right? And he said, you know what? They don't even need to be good lacrosse players. They just need to look really pretty when they run and dodge. So I ran one drill, told the guys what to do in the drill. And we got done with the drill for 10, 15 minutes. And he pulled me to the side and said, that was amazing. I already know who I want on my cast. Do you want a job? And that's how it started. So then all of a sudden, that was my entryway into behind the camera in the movie business, so to speak.
Well, that's awesome.
You also play that down a little bit because that was the first full-length feature film about lacrosse.
Yeah.
Too.
Yep. So featuring the sport. Yeah. Major motion picture, international distribution, did get picked up by Fox and Sony. So, didn't do great in the box office, but, the story itself, the message, the lacrosse, we certainly inputted as much as we possibly could as to what players were doing at that time, gleaning some dodges and moves from social media. And, we have Lyle's behind the back dodge before it became what it is today, so people got to see it even then. And I knew he was doing it because I had seen him do it in high school. So I was like, hey, we got to put this on camera. So it was kind of like knowing the sport. And the other person that was working with me, interestingly enough, on all the lacrosse coordination was Jameson Kester, who's a Division I lacrosse coach.
Right.
Yeah. So
I had an interesting idea that I'd actually put across to Joanne Storkin, was to take the Field of Dreams idea. And I think it would be a much better idea to do it with lacrosse, and especially since a lot of the legends that we'll be talking about are still around. So they actually could make cameo in there and really tell a story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can walk out of the cornfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, there's a lot of really fun ideas. I think lacrosse is still there's a lot of football movies, a lot of baseball movies, basketball, and all of those films, obviously I went to college where I spend more time watching movies, right? And so, I fancied myself as a movie connoisseur, even though I didn't go to school for it. And what I did learn growing up within the Haudenosaunee and Indigenous culture was a really good understanding of storytelling, how to tell a story, right, and what exists within the story, so that people are engaged and part of that process. My father and Oren were my mentors, and they've been speaking internationally for decades, right? So those are the people that were teaching me how to tell a story. So I kind of understood how we as Indigenous people told stories, and that's one thing that I never really saw in a movie, was that Indigenous style of storytelling. And so when I first saw the Crooked Arrow script, I was like, cool skeleton, a lot of cool things we could add into this. And so I did as much as I could to do that while still telling a contemporary story that would speak to a broad audience. And I think we achieved that, which is probably the thing I'm most proud of with that.
Yeah, because you also took the trying to modernize and put it in with tradition, and I love the way everything meshed together, and
Yeah, there's a lot of jokes about the irony around technology and Indigenous people using it, and the assumption that we're not using it, but we all got phones, So we play on a lot of that kind of nuanced irony of stereotypes versus reality.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get back into some of the schooling that you had, and some of your playing there. We're going to start there, and we'll talk about Nazareth College.
Yeah.
And you had a great career there. Absolutely. One of the most prolific scorers in Nazareth history, 3-time All-American attackman for the Golden Flyers, earned first team All-American honors in '95, setting a single season Nazareth scoring record with 57 goals, etc. Let's talk about the program itself first off, and then how you developed in there.
Yeah. Well, when I went in, it was still a pretty young program. So that year, that 95, that was the 10th year anniversary of the program. Mm-hmm. They had already played in the NCAA National Division III National Championship Tournament a number of times and had already won a national championship by the time I arrived in 92. So they, in 92, winning a national championship after only being a program for 7 years, they did a really good job bringing in guys. My brother was actually, my middle brother, Brad, not Barry. He was actually one of the first, he was on one of the first teams. And they were fortunate to have gotten a couple All-Americans from some non-traditional spaces, one from Rochester, one from Buffalo, that were really good players. And then they also said, hey, you know what? There's all these native players. That's an untapped resource. And Scott Nelson was the head coach for the national team in 1990. So he gets Cam Bomberry, Darius Kilgore, Rich Kilgore, my brother Brad, Jake Lazor, Jerome Lazor. These guys are really good lacrosse players that had professional careers, Division I, could have gone Division I, didn't for whatever reason, and end up in Nazareth supporting all of these other, All-Americans and other players that didn't end up in other Division I programs, and they just hit the scene just full on running full speed. So by the time I showed up, it was kind of not on their coattails, but it was certainly riding that train of that success from 92. So I was fortunate as a starter for 3 years to only lose 3 games.
Yeah, and a record of 51-6 in your 4 seasons. That's astounding.
Yeah, and losing three of those losses were as a freshman when I wasn't starting, so I didn't have any control over those 3 losses.
Right.
Yeah, but the 3 that I lost, I own those.
Yeah.
But we had a good, we had an undefeated season to the national championship in '95 when I broke the record. We only played 15 games that year.
Right.
So that's 15, 57 goals in 15 games. It was, I was averaging a hat trick a game. So it was a really good season, and it's been broken. And the year it was broke, my dad was real clear. He's like, that guy needed 18 games to be your 15 game point total.
Right. If it was any other sport, there'd be an asterisk beside it.
Right. Yeah. So my dad still, to his last day, he said, "You still hold that record, by the way."
I agree.
So, but it was a good year. I had a good season. I had a good support. We had a good team. A couple other natives on that team as well. So it was fun. I had a good time. It was a good college, and Scott Nelson, to his credit, really did a good job of combining the X's and O's and allowing the flexibility and freedom of all of those native players coming through his program to incorporate some of that creativity into his game. He knew, having coached the Nationals, having, had Darius and Rich there for a year, if I try to hold these horses too tightly, they're going to fucking, go stallion and disappear. Right. And so he kind of, by the time I showed up, he kind of understood, all right, Neal and Cam, you guys are going to do your thing. Right. I'm going to create some opportunities for you to do your thing within the system so the rest of the team can know what you guys are doing, because we know you guys are going to just do things, one, that we've never seen before, and 2, creatively, to allow us the spaces to do those things. Cam was he was amazing on the point on the 3-3, and he was just doing things, with the stick and fakes, and the goalies had no idea where the ball was. And then to put me in there and me doing my thing and, behind the back feeds to the crease off a skip pass from Cam, the goalies didn't even know where the ball was, and the crease guys shooting the ball in the net, and the D's looking around where's the ball? And then we're it's in the goal. We're celebrating, and no one else knew where the ball was. You know what I mean? It was literally that kind of quick kind of stuff that was going on. And Nelson was like, yeah, guys, go have fun. But I remember some of my teammates on my junior and senior year that came to practice and watched us play. And, I was doing things in practice that guys, they were like, well, why is this guy here at Nazareth? He could be any D1 school he wants. And good lacrosse. And they had a great academic program that I was looking for. And the money was there. That made sense for me not to go for a D1 school.
Right. And then you wound up going into Syracuse anyways to do your master's.
Yeah. Yeah, academically, it was fine, right? And we got to play Syracuse. I got to scrimmage against Syracuse. I got to scrimmage against Hobart. I got to play against Hobart. I played Southbury. I mean, I played amazing lacrosse, and probably my best friend growing up, Gail Schindler went to Loyola, and after his freshman and sophomore year, he, hanging out, playing at Onondaga in the summer, he's like, man, he's like, you're a D1 player through and through. He's like, you'd be a starter on any team, and I'm like, I know, but I'm here, having a good time, and I'm still gonna play international lacrosse, and I'll probably still get drafted for pro, and I did,
Yes, you did.
so it worked out.
That's my next one, is where we go off into the Nighthawks in
Mhm.
MILL. Still with the Fritz and all that, but 1997, you win the championship with them.
Yep. It was a great 9 months. I won the national championship with Nazareth in '96. Went to the Six Nations, played Senior A there, and won their third. I was on that team with the three-peat in '96 for the Man Cup. I was on that team as well. And then I get drafted and end up with the Rochester Nighthawks, and we win the world championship. So that was a whirlwind journey of championships in 9 months.
Yeah, well, that Rochester team, that was first off a phenomenal team, but in the heyday of Rochester, and packed arenas, and a fan base is engaging all the time. So let's talk about just the era, because we'll go and try and compare eras in a bit, but just that particular era, here you are coming in pro lacrosse, and it's like, here it is.
That was the spandex era.
Yeah.
The ladies.
The retro games, I have them up, so don't worry.
Oh yeah, yeah. The spandex shorts era. That was our fun days. That first year was fun. I mean, we had a fair amount of native players on that team as well, in different key roles. Yule Baker was on there, Mike Benedict was there, Rex Lyons was there. So we had. Dewey Jacobs was on the roster, so I mean, we were just deep. We were deep in a lot of places, and I only ended up playing a few games, and I thought I was a pretty good player. But even then, I was contributing in those games I played in, but it wasn't enough to make the lineup every game. And it was really fun to kind of be on that team though and play with Paul. And then I got to play with Paul a couple years later when the Syracuse Smash started up. He moved to Smash, and then I moved to Smash, and we ended up playing together in '99. And at that time, he had played a number of pro years, and he set a single season assist record that year that he broke a number of years later playing with his brother Gary, again later on in their career in Philly. But up to that point, that was the most assists he'd ever had in a season, and I was like, cool. That was me banging out D guys and freeing up his hands as much as possible. He wasn't assisting to me, but he was able to see the field because my job was just free his hands up, and if I get the ball back, put it away when I can, So as a player, score goals, sure, but I also always wanted to make the team better no matter what I was doing, right? Whether it was helping out, a better player or helping out the primary player or picking up the slack in a moment in a game, right? Whatever I could do, the focus was always that and the team, and what would my role be in the team, right? More so than
one of the things that we've talked about a number of times with a number of guests is we're talking about the golden era, basically where you were there and where we are now. What do you see as the biggest differences of the game then? Because I found the game so much more exciting when I'm watching retro tapes than a lot of the stuff that's very predictable now. Yeah.
Well, I think when I first started, right, those first few years I was in the league, that was more American players, which led to a more athletic brand of lacrosse that had a little more random mistakes. Random on the defensive side, random on the offensive side, forced passes here and there, but then there was just flat out speed. If you didn't have speed, you would have a hard time playing in that league, right? I was fortunate enough to have had no size, but speed. I'm short, right? 5'10", right? But I had quickness and speed. So I was able to hold my own in that space, in that era, when it was literally Charlie Lockwood going 90 miles an hour running a 4.3 up and down the field all night long. Like, I mean, it's hard to keep up with that speed every game, every night throughout 60 minutes. And that's what created the excitement, is that these guys could just take off and someone had to chase them down. And the goalie pads were a little smaller, so you had goalies like Dallas Eliak who would dive around and jump around, which made it exciting when they made a save. And when they missed the save, it was exciting because their arms were flying around, right? Marty O'Neill did the same thing, right? And so you had exciting visual goal on the goalie side. You had speed up and down between the lines, and you had this kind of randomness about what happened on offense and defense that just was really unpredictable, because you had American field players playing in an offense that didn't always do what they were supposed to do. They didn't always set picks the way they didn't always use the pick. Sometimes they'd run away, because they would be like, get away. I can beat this guy one-on-one, get out of my way, And so that was a really unique blend of the game, and why players like Casey Paul become pretty good at it, because he was really athletic. He had really good stick skills, and he's an amazing athlete, right? And committed to getting better. Right, which you can see now, same way John Grant and Matthews with the size, but the stick skills that came with it, right? Casey had those exact same stick skills that they did. It's just once he learned the game, he got better. So I think that combination of those things, less wind resistance with the spandex shorts helped. But yeah, it was an interesting era, because I know I lifted more to stay in the game and professional than I did to be successful in college.
Right. See, the other thing is,
I had to be able to push and take that speed of a hit every night out, game after game.
well, that's the other point of it too, is it was the fastest game on 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is anymore, because we have guys running off to the bench, sauntering on offense, running off on offense, sauntering on defense, pulling up. We don't have that fluidity that you're talking about, of randomness.
Yeah.
And it's easy for, we talk about guys like Matt Vince being, just the best goalie ever. But, when you're able to set up for the shot and know where it's coming, that's half the battle, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I played with Corey Calhoun in Columbus Land Sharks, and he was a Division I All-American. He was all over the place. Played defense, run down, play offense. He was one of those guys that would just literally grab the ball, run it down, and fast break. And I don't know how many times he took shots where I would be on the bench like, oh, hey, good goal. And he comes off the bench and you high five him, and he's like, yeah, and in your head you're thinking, you shouldn't have ever taken that shot from that angle, right? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, now he's going to do it a few more times because it went in, right? But he had a way of doing it, right? I saw him take a behind the back shot that I think he just hooked it more than he knew, and it bounced and went in the near. When you're running by the goal and you shoot it behind the back and it goes bouncer near side top corner, do you mean that? It's that kind of thing, right? But he did that all the time, and that was the interesting thing, is that that athleticism.
Right.
That's what's missing. Not that the pro players now aren't amazing athletes, because Byrne and all the Bandits, every team has amazing athletes. It's just they don't get to showcase that speed in the same way that they do.
Right.
That's just the difference.
Right.
Probably better athletes. It's just they don't get to show it.
Right. Now, you touched upon your time with the Six Nations and winning on the third of the three-peat of the Man Cup.
Yep.
Let's talk about the MSL and the Man. And again, something that is really, it bugs me because I think it's fantastic lacrosse. I love summer ball. I love going to the arenas. I love covering it. I love being part of it. I loved it years ago. What's the difference now, and why they can't draw crowds other than Peterborough?
That's a great question, and I'm not really sure, because I think that, I mean, the athletes are still there. Maybe it's the predictability of the systems. Sometimes things just get too predictable. They get a little bit tiring. I don't know. Same teams fighting for the championship every year. That might be part of it. I mean, it's like you said, it's amazing lacrosse. It's great to watch and to see what the guys can do. And they're making shots and doing things. What's funny is in Prague, uh, Sean Evans coaches Switzerland, and I coached the Dutch. And I was playing on a team, and we played against Switzerland in the AHM, and it was kind of like Sean and I going back and forth with goals. And I'm on my bench going, don't let Sean touch the ball. Don't let him shoot, right? And then I find out after the game that he's on the bench telling his team the same thing. Don't let that one guy shoot. Let everybody else shoot but that one guy, right? So it's just kind of this interesting thing where coming from that space, we knew that if you give one of us enough time and space, you're going to make someone pay. And I think that expertise of being able to do that, I think like NBA basketball kind of suffers it a little bit too, where, every time Steph Curry steps up for a shot, even if it's in the stands, he seems to put it in, right? Mm-hmm. And while that's exciting to see the goal, it's like, well, it's almost more exciting sometimes when they miss, right? And I think maybe the major series kind of suffers from that a little bit, maybe in the fan base side. But like I said, they deserve to be seen. They deserve to be watched. I think there's plenty of senior B teams that deserve to be seen and watched because for whatever reason, those guys can play in the pros, but they're playing in their B teams, whether it's community town or family pride or whatever it might be, right? And same with the Onondaga when we won the President's Cup the last time in 15. We had Miles and Lyle and Jeremy and Heina Thompson on that team. We also had Brett Bucktooth on the team and myself, and so we had plenty of pros, but we all grew up there, right, and wanted to play at home, right? That was the draw for us that year. So that was, you never really know what's, who's going to show up in those B loops, but I think B or A, I don't think they get the crowds that the athletes deserve to what they put in.
Right. I also feel as though it's almost like it's haves and have-nots. You have the Peterborough, Six Nation, Oakville who have money.
Yeah.
And can get the best players. And then you have the Coburgs, the Brooklyns, Brampton, Owen Sound, in which the have-nots, and they seem to be the farm system. So as soon as they spend the time and the blood, sweat, and tears developing, in comes the money and off they go.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
Yeah, there's that. So there's inequities always kind of creates that. You see it in Formula One, right? Mm-hmm. Same teams, same groups always at the top level, and the same teams fighting for third and fourth, and that's not as exciting either. Everyone wants an underdog. That's what makes movies exciting is the underdog. The underdog's going to get a chance to win, and that's what you want to see, right? And I think more parity draws in more crowds because you don't know who's going to win. And I think that's why the NLL is getting more crowds, right? Is that there is more parity and you don't really know, are they going to win this time, right? Because teams are losing, good teams are losing to teams that they probably shouldn't lose to, and that's exciting.
This playoffs is a great example of that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So let's talk about the World Lacrosse Championships, and of course the first thing before you played in four of them: 94, 98, 2002, 2006. But of course the question comes to mind is the stupidity that the Haudenosaunee have to go through every single event.
Yeah.
Being a sovereign nation and having to prove it over and over and over again, that's got to be maddening.
Frustrating in a number of ways, sure. Actually, I played in 5. I played in 92 in the Junior Worlds too.
Okay.
Yeah. But that, that one was in Hofstra, so we didn't have to worry about the passports. Mm-hmm. I got to go to England in 94, and at the time, it wasn't as big of an issue, right? Post 9/11, everything gets way more complicated. Yep. And I think that's one piece, an important piece of the puzzle that doesn't often get talked about. I think the other thing that's important to understand, especially in this Olympic era, with you're talking about like how is this recognition not happening?
Yeah.
Most people don't know or realize that the Haudenosaunee have been talking to the UN and talking to them about full partnership representation and equal standing for over 100 years.
Wow.
It's a long, it's not a new fight for us. It's 100-year-old plus fight.
I know Warren Lyons has had a number of conversations with them.
Yeah. And so last summer, Geneva hosted a big event, and they invited a number of Haudenosaunee delegates, all traveled on their passport, all went through customs, and in that process, they actually celebrated the 100-year anniversary of Discahe going to Geneva, Switzerland, to talk to the United Nations. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that went on there, and maybe some media that you might look into about that whole event last year. My wife was able to be a part of that delegation that traveled to Geneva, and by the time they left Switzerland, the passport agents that were working there actually knew who they were and said, they were actually fighting for the group to go through their line because they wanted to be the ones to stamp their passports. Right. And that was something that they didn't get when they arrived, but because of the coverage and the discussions happening throughout the country while they were there, that's what happened when they left. That's a real powerful moment, right? For an Indigenous community to go out, travel on their passport, and then be acknowledged that whole time while they're there to that level. Some of those delegates have said that they've never traveled to any other country, including the US or Canada, and been more welcomed and felt more welcomed than that. That's something that maybe we could think about, right? As a lacrosse community, about having those conversations about what did Geneva do there? What did they do there? And why aren't we doing that in other spaces?
Right, sure.
And why aren't those conversations with Indigenous leaders to the UN and US membership and all that process? Why isn't there more support there? I think that's an interesting question to have, right? Because it's not just new, and it's not just something that the national team is jumping into every 4 years and saying, well, why did they have this conversation earlier? Mm-hmm. Well, the question is, why didn't anyone listen for the last 100 years?
Absolutely.
That's the real question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, with places like the NLL and taking initiative, like I have the Every Child Matters shirt on, and little things like that, the Marvel comics this year with the Indigenous stories in there. Do you think that's a good scratching of the surface? Because it's just that, scratching at the surface.
It is scratching at the surface, but it is public. It is visual. It's out there for people to see. Like I said, it's scratching the surface, though. I don't know that it's really kind of addressing some of the real civil rights issues that Indigenous people still face throughout the world, right? Which was some of the things that was happening in the conversations that were going on in Geneva, which is why it wasn't just the Haudenosaunee that were like, wow, this is great, right? It was other Indigenous people from other parts of the world that were also feeling that same welcoming feeling. And so I think that's kind of the essence of what news coverage, media coverage, along with those storytelling opportunities, right? Which is why I like movies, right? I get to tell a story, and it finds a way, whether it's through documentary or film, into your home, right? But what other ways can those stories find their way into the home, and at the same time educate, right?
Right.
And so media coverage is another one of those big funnels, right, that have a way of funneling out sometimes indigenous media or media stories, right?
Well,
so
I think the biggest thing is the residential schools.
Yeah.
Well, because I don't like calling them schools because my school never had a cemetery.
Yeah.
I would suggest a concentration camp more than anything. But with that, if it was any other race, I think there would be tribunals, there would be investigations, there would be court, there would be, and here it's just kind of, it'll quiet down. And I think
Yeah, it's funny you say that. 60 Minutes did this big expose, probably about a year or so ago. Yeah, it was about a year ago. They covered the boarding school system and what was going on, and they covered it as in this is going on in Canada, right? Look at what Canada did. Look at what Canada, look at how terrible that is. Look at what they did to the Native people, right? And then, and then they say, oh yeah, that was 100 or so, 130 or 140 boarding schools in Canada. Oh, by the way, there are 600 in the US. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Look at Canada, how terrible they did here. Look at Canada doing it. Right. So it was like, look at how bad this country is. And they had 140 and we had over 600, but don't look at us. Right. It was just, I think that kind of blind eye is part of the problem. I think it also goes deeper into legal structures, right? The red card system. I also, that's a governmental policy and process that has a way of limiting out and pushing out Indigenous people from their own communities. I also, there's the existence of references to the doctrine of discovery in Canadian and American law. And in the U.S. law, it's actually foundational to land ownership, right? So when they teach land law in the United States, they talk about the Johnson versus McIntosh 1824 case as the primary law case to look at land ownership in the United States. And it says right in there, the doctrine of discovery. So we can look at, 1492 Papal Bull and say, wait a minute, that was 1492 Indigenous people. That was a long time ago. And then in the US, they can say, well, okay, 1824, that was a long time ago too. You're crying over spilled milk, but in 2005, Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the United States versus the town of Sherrill versus Oneida Nation, RBG cites the doctrine of discovery in that response. So that 1492 Papal Bull and the things that says and the belief system within 1492 is alive and well in American legal system in 2005, which says that I have the same rights as a dog and a deer and the squirrel that's running outside my window right now. That's my equal, not you two on this Zoom, or not even the players that I coach, but I'm equal to the squirrel and the dog outside. That's my peers. And then a team will make an Indigenous person as a mascot and say, we're paying honor to you and tribute to you. Well, okay, so your government system says you need a blood quantum card to say who you are, right? So what other sentient beings need a blood breed card? Dogs, horses, and Indigenous people, right? So that's my equals there, right? Then you look at government legally, who are my equals and my peers, right? Doctrine of discovery, the fauna of the land, right? The animals of the land. That's my peers, right? And then you say, well, no, the sports team is paying you tribute. No, you're putting me right back with the animals again. But the dog and the ram and the horse and the Mustang, you're not paying tribute to me there either, right? And I think without understanding those legal impacts, those historical and educational impacts from that conversation, you don't realize that while saying we're paying you honor and tribute to you and your people, well, why don't you put a seat at the table and give me equal conversation? Why don't you recognize my treaty relationships from my ancestors with your country and its foundational structures and borders? And by doing that, you would then acknowledge and justify and verify and validate my sovereign expression, which is to compete with you as an equal at the international stage.
Right.
That's more complicated because then you have to look at who really owns the land then.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are just going to go,
not it. I don't want to horse in that fight because we all know who was really here first.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so then you have to acknowledge that the land was stolen somehow, and how are we going to pay them back for it? Right. but no one wants to really answer that question.
And no one wants to admit to anything either. Yeah.
Right.
All right, let's go talking about your coaching. You been with the Dutch team, I think, since 2014.
Yep.
Let's talk about that program, because when we first met last year, and we did a lot of chatting about that, you, me, Wayne, and all the things that went into the box program and the little fickleness between box and field over there, and where it's at now.
Sure. So I had the good fortune. Actually, it's because of Crooked Arrows. So we actually did the European launch in 2012 at the European Championships, which just so happened to be hosted in the Netherlands. They had a field coach in that tournament who had the right name, but apparently was the wrong person. So that information boiled out after the tournament was over. They decided to go a new route with the coaching. The assistants kind of didn't want to take the job. And one of the assistants is a really good friend of mine. He said, hey, you should take the job. Talked me into it. I was helping out the Nationals at the time, literally on the sideline for a scrimmage the day before. And then I have a lunch and they say, you know, if you want the job, you can be the head coach of the Dutch national team. I was like, what? You know, so we talked about it over lunch, and I said, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of cool. And I said, you know, that there's a long 400-year relationship between the Dutch and the Haudenosaunee, and so this guy didn't even know. And so I said, this is awesome. Yeah, let me say, yeah. I actually kind of talked myself into it in that moment. And in 2014, not realizing I was the first Indigenous person to coach an international team that wasn't our own country's national team, field or box, right? So 14, 16, I coached the field team. The box team started up in 17. I transitioned over. One of the assistants that was on that 14, 16 team took over the field team, and also is now in charge of the Netherlands Lacrosse. He's an American guy who lives in the Netherlands. And, you know, as an American guy who went to an American college, grew up with that in that system, you know, had heard little things here and there about how lacrosse was a Native American game, but never really was exposed, certainly at the level that even some youth USA lacrosse players are exposed to now, to that knowledge. Didn't really see value in it. So we kind of didn't really align in that way right from the start. And then he also didn't see the value in box lacrosse as much as in the moment, right? Having played so much of box and field, I knew where box skills really translated well to field. I also knew where field skills really translate well to box, right? Having played in that era, you know, the athlete era in the NLL or MIL, then NLL, because there was still a few years there in that transition. We still had a lot of field players in the league. And so I got to see how field player and field skills really can be utilized and translated into box. And so when I got the Dutch in 17, it was kind of like, okay, how do I actually try to make this a reality and actually do some of the things that I've thought in my head would work? So the Netherlands box team has kind of been a guinea pig for me to see if a lot of these ideas actually work. And in 2019, we actually finished 8th in the world, which was pretty cool.
Yes.
I think we shocked a lot of people. And I think we even shocked ourselves, to be honest with you. I don't think many of the players really, you know, they talked like they wanted to play at that level. We want to be in the blue division, you know, not realizing the work and the effort and the heart and the dedication and the time to get to that space. And early in that tournament, we scrimmaged Puerto Rico. And it was funny. There was a point there where some of the guys were saying, oh, let him pick up the ball, right? And they let the guy pick up the ball, and then they play D or do whatever. And then the next day we scrimmaged the Haudenosaunee, right? Because of that 400-year relationship with the Dutch. They said yes to a scrimmage request from me. And Miles says to another guy on the team, let him pick up the ball. And they were like, whoa. Yesterday we were saying, let them pick up the ball so they could get a chance. And now these guys are saying, let him get the ball. Let him try. And I was like, well, there you go.
It's an eye opener.
That's how much you have to work to get to where they're at. And that that really shifted our training camp, right? Because then they really realized, wow, we really got to put in the work, and really kind of get into like how can we become what we say we want to be, right? And luckily, I think that the practice before we played Ireland, we did a little scrimmage thing, and I turned to the coaches and the support staff that was there, and I looked at them, and I had been saying from the beginning, we're going to shock the world, we're going to beat Ireland, we're going to shock, right? And I kept putting it in their heads. And I turned and looked at everybody and I said, what do you guys think? And they're like, you might be right. You know, and at the beginning, they were like, no way, we're not going to do it. No way, right? But I had a plan. I had a system I wanted to create, and I had to build the belief into each player and our coaching staff to get there. And yeah, we shocked the hell out of Ireland, and then in AHM this past, you know, last month they beat the hell out of us as a payback. So, and that's fine. That's how it works, right? And that's how you get better, right? But we look forward to an opportunity to play them in Utica, and if we match up with them again, we'll give them a game, you know, and we'll do our best that we can that day.
That was my next question: was what do we expect from the team come Utica in September?
I'm excited, right? Because it's not only just the team, but, you know, I've had a few conversations with some other of our community members in the Haudenosaunee, and they know that I coach the Dutch team, and our people are really excited to see that I'm the head coach of that team, right? Of all teams, right? This community that we have this 400-year-old treaty with, you know, and we refer to them as our brothers and our sisters. In fact, he's the assistant coach with the women's team this year, but he was my assistant coach with the box teams up to this point. Artur Ceslar has a video log, and it's called "We Shall Know Each Other as Brothers." It's awesome. He's got a website out. I think it's like 18 or.
I'm in chapter 19.
Okay, yeah. Chapter, I think it's 19 or 21 chapters he's got. But I mean, he's a really good videographer. I mean, he's a very good videographer. He's a good video guy. He's really good at editing. And he understands how to tell a really good, captivating story. And you kind of get to see a Dutch guy who's talking about this relationship, about the Tura Wampum, and talking about relationships and showing up as brothers and sisters. And what does that mean? And what does that look like today, right? 400 years later, you know, and how do we show up for each other, and how do we show compassion and listen to each other and show thoughtfulness and care for each other? It's really interesting to kind of, I started showing that video log at different presentations here in the States. And it's like, why should you care about Indigenous people? Well, here's a Dutch guy who cares. Why? You know, and so we have that conversation. Why does this guy care? You know, he cares a lot, you know, and he's really funny while he does it, right? Which is exciting to watch.
I have a stake in the race too. I'm Dutch.
Yeah.
My family's Dutch as well, from Holland.
And there's a lot of Dutch in Canada, I'm finding out.
Yes.
And so I think it's.
My aunt is Dutch.
Yeah. So we have some Canadian players who have Dutch passports, right? And they have Dutch names. You know, they don't hide their heritage and their relationship to the Netherlands. They celebrate it, they enjoy it, and you know, it's great to have them part of the club, right? Which does make us a little more competitive in some ways, but they still have to fit in, right? And the guys from Europe, from the Netherlands, they have to have a certain level of skill and knowledge and ability for it to work, right? And that's on me to teach. That's on me to create, you know, they're like those wild horses from the early NLL, MILL days. You know, that's what I'm trying to teach. How do you guys do what I saw back in the beginning of my career that actually made a difference and made people have to play you a different way, right? Absolutely. I'm trying to help them hone those things and take advantage of those skill sets that they have, because they are so tall, they are athletic, And I mean, they're just bigger than other European people. It's crazy. I mean, there's a huddle, and I'm literally staring up at everybody,
Yeah.
and the only guys I'm kind of looking closer to are the guys from North America. All the European Dutch guys are 6'5" and taller. It's insane, right? And you put a stick in their hands, and you give them some technique, and you give them some guidance, and man, they do some amazing stuff.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting up again with you in September at the Utica Championships.
Yeah.
For sure, and chat some more. I really want to thank you for taking the time. This hour just went by like this.
Sure.
But
Yeah, it did, and hopefully, hopefully we can do enough prep in leading up to Utica to do something close to what we did in 2019. To come in eighth was a surprise and an honor. And we got a big target on our back and our chest and our head, and everyone wants to shoot us down, especially Germany and Finland and all the teams that didn't get that rank that say no, we're better. So we got a lot of work to do to play at that level, because the way the tournament is set up, we might have to play one of those teams,
right,
and win that game to get to that same rank.
Sure.
Which is great. I welcome the challenge, right? That's how you get better, is by you play the best people you can. And that's how you find out what you got to work on to get better. So we found out, once we got into those top 8 games, what we needed to do to get better. So we're working on those things.
Awesome. Thank you again. Really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And, I hope people get to go to Utica and check out European lacrosse. It's better than you think. Those Germans are pretty damn good. The Finns are amazing lacrosse players. And, I think the Dutch guys are pretty good and hold their own as well. We played pretty tight with Ireland with an all-European group, 7-10 at halftime, against an Ireland team that has a fair amount of Canadians and Americans on their team. So I am thoroughly excited to see what happens in Utica, not only just for us, but the other European teams to lay claim to that NBL league they got over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's some serious box lacrosse going on over there, and that AHM tournament and the Frank Meshner tournament and everything that's going on in Prague. That's some amazing lacrosse going on over there. And they got kids, we had a 15-year-old on our team that was one of our top scorers in the AHM. A 15-year-old.
Story. It's a great story. We'd like to have you come back and tell us more.
Sure.
I'd like to personally apologize to you and your people for what you went through. I think the toughest thing for a people to accept is shame. And we all know what happened is shameful. What happened to Aboriginal people in this country and the world and everywhere else where Aboriginal people have been treated. I won't define it. I'll just say they haven't been treated right. And I think it's really hard for a people to deal with shame, no matter how small that shame is and how far away it is. Mm-hmm. And it's too bad we can't figure out a way to release that shame. And releasing it means accepting forgiveness from the people you've hurt. So I apologize for what happened to you, because I know it takes something you take very personally. I just want you to know that. Okay, Neal?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as an ombuds, who works in conflict management, conflict resolution, and does presentations about restorative justice. In fact, I'm doing one next week, next weekend. It's about showing up. It's how we show up. It's, how do you make things right is something that the Haudenosaunee have said. And even in the documentary I'm working on now, people screen the documentary, and we talk about some of the stuff in that documentary about lacrosse. And when they get done, the non-native people say, how do these Haudenosaunee people still show up and communicate in the way that how are they not angry? How are they not violent? How are they not just, trying to burn down the gate? How is it that they show up with such honor, and thoughtfulness, and it's the thousands of years of peace that we've been able to derive between our communities, that we draw knowledge from, which goes back to restorative justice. It goes back to, how do you make things right? And so we know that in order for things to be made right, that we have to acknowledge that we have to show up together, and we have to make space for each other. And so we make space for that conversation. And if I came here angry, you wouldn't be inspired to apologize and make space for that. But by showing up in a certain way, we open up the opportunity to have that conversation and dialogue about how can we survive, not just survive, but thrive together.
Right.
Yeah.
While acknowledging that past in the process.
To not being able to actually see the runes, you have to imagine them in some ways. So that makes it difficult too.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, Neal. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right.
Glad to be invited. I appreciate it. And I welcome more invitations.
We'll have you back again once the documentary's done. We'll want to hear how it went.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. We're hoping to, we got a lot of really cool things going on with that. So there'll be another update there for sure.
Excellent.
Thank you, Neal.
Yep.
And for Gary Groob and Neal Powless, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching NLL Lacrosse Talk. Thank you for watching NLL Lacrosse Talk, seen live Thursdays at 4 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Lacrosse Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out Candid Frank Stanisci 1030 on YouTube. Have a great day, everybody.